Yeah, Peter Todd. I'm a applied cryptography consultant. That's kind of like what hydraulic engineering, equivalent to say cryptography is to plumbing.
Hi, I'm Willie Wu. I do on-chain analysis, which is kind of looking into the on-chain ledger and divining where the price might go. And I'm a partner in a hedge fund, Adaptive Capital. Kind of work with Jimmy a bit in some startups as well in the space.
I'm Jimmy Song, and I sell cowboy hats sometimes.
My name is Bobby Lee. I'm the founder CEO of Ballet. We are a maker of physical wallets for cold storage, multi-currency. So we have a booth out here. Love to meet you guys. This is made for the mass market, mass adoption. Thank you very much.
All right, we're waiting for questions. Is that the deal?
Mic check. Yeah. Anyone have any questions? We got about we got a few minutes before we get some of our sponsors to just show what products they have. Question.
This is just a question about accessibility. Of course, I'm a blind person. I just want to know what you guys think, if it's even in your orbit as to considering accessibility versus through the APIs or other sorts of accessibility. Considering Bitcoin is supposed to bring, something to the world in terms of, like with remittances and the unbanked and that kind of stuff. My experience has been a lot of the stuff has been inaccessible and hard to access. So that's my question. What are your thoughts?
Well, I want to say that is a great idea for somebody that's an entrepreneur, right? Like marketing to people like you. Because there are lots of underserved populations that want to get into Bitcoin, that want to get into crypto, and that want to do things in this space, but they can't. And all it takes is an entrepreneur that knows what the needs are and finds a product market fit.
So I'd actually go point out, command line interfaces have potential working well with screen readers, and I personally, I'd much rather go use wallets and other tools for Bitcoin through command line interfaces. So, right there, I think you've got an option.
Is JP in the room? Where's JP? Yeah, okay. JP here runs Exodus Wallet, and they do, to me, it's a very Mac-like experience to interact with crypto, and it's really pitched for the mainstream. And I think it's like companies like this, you could probably add it, right? Like the ability to add accessibility to interact with these assets and even decentralized finance around that. And I think we're getting there. It's taken a while. It's taken us 10 years to even get wallets that work for ordinary people. And I think we're almost getting there. Figuring out even how to hold private keys is still a challenge. Grandma keeps losing it. Boomers keep losing it. So we got to solve that first, and then, I think this stuff will come in due time when, only 1% of the world at tops owns these assets. So traditionally, you don't get to catering for everyone when we're only at 1%, and so it'll take time, but it's fast growing.
All right. Anybody else? Question? If you want to come over to the mic, you gotta have something for these guys, or for me. All right. Let's see. There you go. All
right.
Go for it.
One of the things.
One gulp.
One of the things that's being talked about as the next big fight or drama that's going to happen in the industry is going to be privacy versus sort of surveillance and how that's going to play out. I'm starting to see some of the signs that's happening. There's a big arrest recently of a CEO, I think it was like Dropbit or something like that, talking about money laundering and so on. How do you guys see that playing out? Are we going to have default privacy in Bitcoin, or is there going to be there's going to be some sort of split, right? One idea that I heard is that for money to be money, there has to be a bridge between the dark market and the white market, right? I think it's an interesting idea, right? If the dark money can't get out of the dark market, then it doesn't work. If it's only white money, it's not really innovative, right? So Anyway, there's a topic.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is black market money and legal money. It's kind of an interesting way to look at it because at least up until say 100 years ago, there wasn't that distinction between illegal money and legal money. That money wasn't used as a means of control to make it so that people can or can't do stuff. I suspect that the whole privacy stuff will slowly be integrated into a lot of the privacy stuff that we see that wallet software can implement right now, just hasn't been because it hasn't been that much of a priority. So Taproot definitely brings a lot more of that in. You can't tell the difference between pay-to-script hash and pay-to-pub-key hash addresses and things like that. I think stealth addresses will become more popular as people recognize their benefits and things like that. There's also confidential transactions on things like Liquid. So there are already avenues to sort of wash your coins if you want to. It's just a matter of time before the software and the demand, frankly, of a lot of people catches up to that. And until that does, it's honestly not going to get made. But we got a lot more ways to go before Bitcoin is super popular with everyone. At that point, there will be a market for almost everything, including privacy.
I mean, a point I've often made, and probably been making this for years, is that for decentralized protocols to scale, of course, they can't spread the information about your transactions as widely. And I think we'll see some of that tension in things like Lightning, where the number of people can actually go and do chain analysis really drops a lot. And certainly some companies can go try to run, Lightning nodes that record blogs and so on, but that's a much harder environment to be in compared to everyone doing something on chain. And that combined with things like Taproot certainly makes life a lot more difficult. And it's interesting how you get things like Zcash, where if actually used, has very, very good privacy, assuming the tech actually works as advertised. But that sort of caveat I don't think actually matters that much for the policy discussion. And we also then have some government officials then now coming on the side of it saying, well, we actually need these protocols to have privacy. And it could very well turn out to be that the big fight is not actually in Bitcoin, but in sort of fiat currencies as various entities try to go make them digital. That might actually be the bigger political fight, and I'm kind of hoping it is, because then it gives us a lot more leverage, and we don't have to be at the forefront of that as much, and would probably benefit a lot from just having that controversy, regardless of which ways it goes.
All right, take another question, guys. Don't forget, we also have a book signing, Jimmy Song and Saifuddin. I'm also sitting right there. So feel free to purchase one of their books, or if you've brought your own, and they'll be happy to sign it for you. All right, next question.
What is your opinion on the viability and the roadmap for Taproot, Schnorr, TapScript? And what is something that developers that maybe have not contributed to Bitcoin Core can do to help sort of accelerate the timeline, or vet the proposal to improve it?
I feel like I'm answering every question, but yeah, Taproot, it's definitely coming along, and I think the army of reviewers that actually looked at it during the Taproot review period late last year, they did a great job. I think we have a very, very good proposal that's out there. As far as adoption, I think it's it's going to take some time. I don't think you ever want to hurry something that's this, it's a big soft fork. So we want to get everything right. But the benefits are gigantic, and you're going to save block space, and you're going to have the ability to verify all the transactions in a block at some savings because you can add all the points together and things like that. So I'm hoping that this will be executed towards the end of this year. I think that's kind of an optimistic timeline, but I don't think you want it any faster than that. So somewhere between the end of this year and say maybe the end of next year is probably the time frame that we're looking at. And I think that's okay. I think that's the right level of due diligence that needs to happen on something this big.
I mean, I'll just say I think it'll be very interesting seeing whether or not someone manages to create a bunch of controversy around it this time. We saw that with SegWit, and this is the next big upgrade, and who knows what will happen.
All right. Anyone else? Go for it.
I think I have more of a.
In the mic for the audio.
Hello.
Yep. Perfect.
I think it's more of a societal question than development oriented. Big institutional, big institutions in general coming into Bitcoin. Does that hurt or help the adoption for the general mass?
So big institutions coming in, does it hurt or help? That's a good question. We'll have a panel on the finance at the end of the day tomorrow, so we'll see what they say. But go for it, guys.
Yeah, so working on the legislation in Wyoming that creates the special purpose depository bank, it's crafted for those institutions. And I think we should keep in mind that those institutions don't necessarily have the same goals that a lot of the original Bitcoin kind of ideas might be. They want to have a custodian that holds their private keys, hence a special purpose depository bank that can custody digital assets. They need to have things like that. These institutions become a pipeline for liquidity or capital to be able to come into the asset class. The people who have the gold makes the rules, right? People who hold the Bitcoin, they make the rules. And these big institutions are already holding billions of dollars of Bitcoin. They'll continue to probably hold more and more of that. So they'll continue to have a bigger and bigger say in what type of extensibility happens with Bitcoin and what doesn't. Remember, we need very wide consensus to get stuff done. 90, at least 95%. And so, if we don't have wide consensus, like we just ossify, and so some people may have things that they want to get in, but they're just not going to get in because whatever reason, maybe these large institutions are getting pressure from the regulators, for example. And so they challenge, they raise concerns about whatever type of proposal might be coming through, and then it doesn't get very wide consensus, and then it just stops, and Bitcoin ossifies. It gets this store of value characteristic and whatnot. It's going to be interesting to see how it happens. We should keep in mind it's only a $170 billion market cap. I mean, some of these institutions have that much cash on their balance sheet. Like Bitcoin is tiny compared to these institutions. So, whether, and then it's, are they going to use something like Libra or the central bank digital currencies, or, there's just a lot of ways that this can all play out. And the Bitcoin network, it's a protocol, but then the legal code is a protocol that our society operates on. And no amount of great wealth has been accumulated without the basically the permission of that particular legal protocol. And if you have accumulated large amounts of wealth and done it not in accordance with that protocol, you usually get caught and thrown in the pokey. So, these are all going to be tensions because these large institutions are going to be paying their taxes. All the Bitcoiners are going to increasingly have the cost of taxes like fully borne. You're now checking a box on your tax return. You're now going to you're going to have these permanent immutable ledgers with all your transactions. You're going to have to keep all of the records and transactions that are happening. If you don't do it, you're going to rack up potential penalties and interest and all types of stuff. And so these become attack surfaces and attack vectors for the regulators and the tax authorities and the lawyers to attack your HODL stack. And in terms of the qualitative characteristics of money, these large institutions, because they have entire armies of accountants and lawyers, they don't really need to worry about the qualitative characteristics of money when it comes to the privacy and the anonymity and the fungibility. So they, aren't necessarily going to be in favor of those types of upgrades to Bitcoin, because they see those as bugs versus features. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out and what individuals choose to do with their capital and with the value that they have.
I mean, I'd actually disagree a bit on this stuff about privacy. I've done consulting, like, for instance, with R3 and other stuff for banks, and one of the impressions I get is while they have a different outlook on things like privacy in terms of what they can do and how the regulatory landscape works with them, their basic goal, like, much to the sort of crypto anarchists, is, they want privacy as much as they can, because privacy for a big institution is a competitive advantage. The last thing you want to do is have your competitors know what you're doing when you don't want them to know. This is why you get weird stuff in sort of the enterprise-y, like, blockchain space, where they're thinking very, very hard about privacy. And even at the same time, when they're also thinking very hard about regulatory compliance. So I don't quite know how that's going to play out. And I wouldn't assume things will play out in a particular way. I think it really depends on the specifics of how this stuff develops and how regulators approach it. And there may be tensions between different countries which have different views on this. And I also point out, I think this gets interesting where you're talking about protocol upgrades, where how, even right now, how a big holder of Bitcoins thinks about the definition of Bitcoin. This is all kind of uncharted territory. They don't quite know how to define what a Bitcoin actually is in the face of things like BSV and Bcash and other forks. And, that's kind of an evolving thing.
We got time for one more question. Oh, I got two. All right, two more questions. Go for it, guys.
Okay, Trace, I've heard you express some unfavorable opinions about coin mixing. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, put yourself in the position of being the chief compliance officer at one of the exchanges. You go to jail if you don't uphold the AML KYC rules. That's why Charlie Shrem went to jail. And the rules, unfortunately, are written in a very nebulous way. And so the chief compliance officers have to operate in a way where they are covering their own rear ends. And so they have to, basically, it becomes a judgment call on their end. It's not like they have a safe harbor on what they're able to do and know that they're not going to go to the pokey. So when it comes to transactions that have gone through mixers, either before or after they come into the exchanges, they just assign a higher risk score. And we saw this when Bitcoin was first coming out. You did any type of Bitcoin related stuff and you automatically had enhanced due diligence done by the AML KYC people, the CCOs and whatnot. And so, it's just the world that you live in. And so when you don't have the privacy and fungibility at the base layer and it's opt-in, you have to keep in mind that most people are not opting in to the privacy. 20 million Coinbase downloads, 50,000 Wasabi wallet downloads. So when you engage in the CoinJoin transactions, you're raising your hand that you do this type of stuff. And so they just lump all of that into a higher risk and do more due diligence on those particular customers. And then you might get your account shut down, you might get your account limited, all these types of things. And I had a friend, he had, he's runs an FTP business for HIPAA compliant data for doctors, and he had done an ACH transfer with Coinbase. They shut down 19 of his bank accounts, all of his businesses, all of his family members, everybody, just persona non grata at the bank. I have another friend, he's actually a self-made multi-billionaire, and he had banked for 40 years with this particular bank. And he goes in one day, and nobody will even acknowledge him because he's now, all of his accounts are closed and he has to take all his money somewhere else. So, I mean, this is serious. Like, these banks are serious when it comes to all of the AML KYC compliance. And unfortunately, the rules are very nebulous, and so they just have to be overly cautious. And you can't really blame them for doing that. And so it just is what it is. And then we look at the characteristics of Bitcoin, and they are what they are. And so, you know, it might not be the use case. You know, you might want to use an airplane instead of a car if you're trying to accomplish something.
Well, let me ask you a quick follow-up. Go ahead, Peter.
I mean, I'd go say, though, if these kind of risks sound too dangerous to you, I'd also have to, unfortunately, give the advice, don't use Bitcoin. You know, like in Canada, ignoring any of this CoinJoin stuff, there's plenty of examples of people's bank accounts getting shut down for just working in cryptocurrency, period. I mean, I personally actually, in a very, very ironic, because it was for a payment from a major European bank for some consulting, TransferWise refused to go and, you know, let me, you know, transfer that payment through their service. It was from a major European bank. I can't say which because of NDA, but like that's just how ridiculous it is. And unfortunately, if that's the level of risk you're working at, well, maybe Bitcoin's not for you. And it's really about marginal risk. You know, you're already taking that much risk on Bitcoin. I'd more argue, well, is additional risk of getting more privacy worth it? Depending on your circumstance, yes. Depending on your circumstance, maybe no.
You know, and along with that, the IRS only takes payment like through the banking system. So the last thing you need is to have you have tax liability and you have your bank account shut down. How are you going to pay the IRS? And guess what? You don't pay them, penalties and interest start accruing, and that's pretty nasty. So, you know, and just ask Ross Ulbricht what it's like.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a quick follow-up, Trace. So, in your statement, like my initial question was going to be, but you somewhat addressed it, is going to be if these exchanges are afraid to take a CoinJoin transaction from a user, how are they justifying the trading of, say, a Monero, which is supposed to be private by default? And isn't every single user of their exchange that sends Monero in automatically falls in the same boat?
Yeah, I mean, gold dealers can deal with gold, and there's no smell to gold. You don't have a transaction history on gold. I think CZ made the comment like, well, we don't get a lot of requests from law enforcement about Monero.
So, well, no one uses Monero, that's probably why. No. But and my other one is, if so few people are using CoinJoin, shouldn't we be more advertising for more people to use CoinJoin than for less? Because if everyone's using CoinJoin, then it is what it is. Then it's like physical gold selling.
Well, it's one, there's a barrier to entry to using it. Two,
not if all the wallets start implementing it.
Well, I mean, somebody's got to write that code and deploy it, and users got to understand like what CoinJoin even is and why it might be important. And now you got to do education on all that stuff. But the other problem is that it's opt-in, and so you know, by opting into it, if it were in the base layer, it would be different because then everybody's doing it by default. But as soon as you have this distinguishment, like Kraken, for example, if you want to send Zcash in, you have to use an unblinded address, from what I understand. I mean, I've never.
But now you have to opt out in order to use it, right? So we're back. so we're back to our circle. All right. Let's get Jimmy's 2 cents on this, and then we'll get one more question, and then we'll get and then we'll turn this over. You're gonna skip it. Okay. You guys good? All right. One more question.
Yeah. So I have a question for Willie. What is your outlook on the current state of the Bitcoin difficulty ribbon?
The current state of the Bitcoin difficulty ribbon, you may want to explain that first, Willie, real quick.
Did you want to expand on that or just in general? Okay, so difficulty ribbon essentially just looks like a ribbon actually, and usually it goes up. Obviously the difficulty on the network goes up, but there are rare exceptions to that rule, and that's when miners start turning off. And so when you look at this ribbon, it starts to compress and sometimes it even dips, and that's a visual telling that miners are going through a hard time. And so what you get is this sort of cascade effect. You know, miners shut down, they're getting liquidated, they're getting bankrupted, they sell their coins onto the market, which forces the price down, and then the next weakest miner goes down. And generally what happens is miners start to capitulate, and then the strongest, meanest, leanest miners hold the line, and and you'll see this as a bottoming of the difficulty, and it climbs again. And if you look at that and you see all these compressions in the ribbon when this sort of minor capitulation event happens, they signal the bottom for Bitcoin price. And we did that in around the 3,000 bottom when we crashed from 6,000. And recently we had, from memory, I think we had a compression leading, I'm trying to remember it because I haven't watched those charts in a while, but it was around after the 14 top, and we're coming back down to the 6,000. No, sorry, not the 6,000, the 6 to 7,000. We did have a compression, and this last compression was quite mysterious because you would have thought just last year the miners got culled, the weak ones did, so it didn't quite make sense. And I was told by miners in the industry that what was happening was they were upgrading old hardware like the S9s and putting in the latest generation, and so they were already turning off their miners for this upgrade, and they weren't actually capitulating. What they were doing was reduce the difficulty. Did reduce because they shut down miners. On top of that, they posted collateral to OTC desks to draw on fiat loans to buy more miners, the next generation. You saw coins leaving their wallets, so you would think they were selling on the market, but no, they were posting it to OTC desks. So it was very much like a false capitulation, but also it coincided with the bottom, which was curious. So the rule worked, and it's always worked. So it's kind of weird, this last one wasn't behind the scenes what you would have thought, but that did happen, and we did see that in the prior halvening as well. And I think in the 2016 halvening we saw the same effect where miners were upgrading before the halvening.
All right, thanks for the update, Willie. All right, guys, we're going to say thank you to some of our speakers that came up.